Most people think the conversation ends when the other person walks away, but for some minds, that's when it finally starts. The room empties out, the air goes quiet, and suddenly the sentence you didn't mean to say sits on your tongue like a bruise. You replay it, you rewind, you edit. You imagine the better version of yourself delivering the perfect line at the perfect moment. And the strange part is, it can feel productive, like you're practicing life, like you're sharpening the blade, but often you're just cutting yourself in slow motion. If you replay conversations in your head, it doesn't automatically mean you're weak or anxious or broken. It means you have a particular relationship with social reality. A relationship where words are not just sounds but evidence. Where tone is not just tone but a verdict. Where a raised eyebrow can become a whole story about your value as a person. And if that feels familiar, you've probably noticed something else too. The mind doesn't replay the whole conversation evenly. It highlights certain seconds like they're fluorescent. The laugh that came too late, the pause that felt too long, the moment you said yeah when you meant no, those are the frames that loop, because the brain isn't trying to remember. It's trying to predict. Conversation replay is often a form of threat detection, wearing the costume of reflection. Human beings are social mammals. For most of our history, being accepted didn't just feel nice, it kept you alive. Exile meant exposure. Rejection meant fewer resources, fewer allies, fewer chances to survive. So your nervous system treats social mistakes like a kind of danger. That's why you can forget where you parked your car, but remember the exact way you mispronounced a word in front of someone you respect. The mind is not fair. It is protective, and protection has a bias toward embarrassment. Here's a scene you might recognize. You're lying in bed. The day is technically over, but your body doesn't agree. Your eyes are closed, yet you can see the conversation like a little stage play. You hear their voice. You hear yours. You hear the silence between you. And now you're doing what the brain loves most when it's anxious. You're filling gaps. Maybe they think I'm arrogant. Maybe I sounded desperate. Maybe I'm not as likable as I thought. Notice how quickly it escalates. It rarely stays at "that was awkward." It turns into "that says something about who I am." That jump is the heart of it. People who replay conversations are often people who learned at some point that small social moments had big consequences. Maybe you grew up with a parent who could change the atmosphere of the house with a single sigh. Maybe affection felt conditional, like it had to be earned with the right tone, the right timing, the right performance of gratitude. Maybe you were praised for being mature when what you were really doing was scanning the room for emotional weather. When you grow up in that kind of environment, you become fluent in implication. You learn to read between lines because the lines themselves were never safe enough. Conversation replay is what that skill looks like when it has nowhere to go. It's hypervigilance after the fact. It's the mind checking the locks long after the door is closed. There's another layer that people don't talk about much: control. Replaying a conversation is painful, yes, but it's also comforting in a strange way. Because while you're replaying, you're in charge. You can pause the scene. You can run different outcomes. You can imagine yourself being calmer, sharper, funnier, more assertive. In real life, you only get one take. In your head, you get endless takes. And if you've ever felt powerless in real life, the mind will happily offer you a theatre where you get to direct. This is why conversation replay often spikes after moments where you felt exposed. A job interview, a first date, a disagreement with someone you can't afford to lose. The higher the stakes, the more the brain tries to re-enter the room and do it again, as if repetition could change what already happened, as if analysis could function like time travel. And sometimes it's not even about what you said, it's about what you didn't say, the unsent reply, the boundary you swallowed, the compliment you didn't return because you panicked. Silence can haunt just as loudly as words. There's a very specific kind of person who becomes addicted to the post-conversation autopsy. Usually they're intelligent, usually they're conscientious. They're the ones who notice patterns, who care about fairness, who want to be understood accurately. And that's exactly the trap, because those traits are beautiful in many contexts, but socially they can become a kind of over-responsibility. You start believing that if someone misunderstands you, it's your fault for not being precise enough. If someone is upset, it must mean you said something wrong. If someone pulls away, you must have failed some invisible test. This is where the replay becomes moral, not just mental. It turns into self-trial, and you become both the prosecutor and the judge. There's also culture. We're living in an era where social performance is constant. People record everything. Screenshots exist. Old messages can be revisited years later. Even when you're not famous, your brain acts like you're being archived. Many of us grew up watching public humiliation as entertainment. Reality shows, comment sections, viral clips of someone saying the wrong thing. So the modern mind learns a new fear, not just being wrong, but being seen being wrong. Not just making a mistake, but having it confirmed by an audience. Conversation replay is partly the internalization of that audience. It's the comment section in your own skull. But there's a reason you can replay the same conversation 100 times and still not feel resolved, because what you're actually seeking is not accuracy, it's safety. The replay isn't about finding the truth of what happened, it's about trying to guarantee that you're still acceptable, that you're not about to be abandoned, that your belonging is intact. And the mind, unfortunately, cannot guarantee that. It can only simulate, it can only estimate. That's why the loop keeps looping. Some people replay conversations because they're high in empathy. They can feel the emotional ripple of what they said, and they want to repair anything that might have caused harm. That can be a form of integrity, but empathy has a shadow. When empathy is mixed with insecurity, it turns into mind reading. You start assuming you know what others felt. And because you're anxious, you assume they felt the worst. You imagine disappointment where there was neutrality. You imagine contempt where there was distraction. You imagine rejection where there was simply someone having a long day. In psychology, we could call this a cognitive distortion, but that phrase makes it sound clinical and distant. In real life, it feels intimate. It feels like you're being honest. It feels like you're seeing the world clearly when you're actually seeing your fear clearly. Another reason people replay conversations is because they were never taught closure. Some families end conflict with resolution. Other families end conflict with withdrawal. The argument stops, but nothing is repaired. Everyone just goes quiet and pretends it didn't happen, while the tension remains in the wallpaper. If you come from that world, your brain learns that unresolved social moments are dangerous. So later, when an adult conversation ends on a vague note, you can't just let it be vague. You chase certainty, you chase a clean ending, you chase the sentence that would finally make it settled. But real human relationships rarely provide that kind of neatness. And the mind, when it can't get closure externally, tries to manufacture it internally. It tries to close the file. It keeps reopening it because it can't find the signature. And then there's shame. Shame is not the feeling that you did something wrong. Shame is the feeling that you are something wrong. Conversation replay becomes a ritual of scanning for proof of defect. You look back at your words the way someone looks at their face under harsh lighting. Too close, too critical, too unforgiving. Why did I talk so much? Why did I laugh like that? Why did I mention that? And the cruelty of shame is that it never asks, what was the full context? It only asks, what does this say about me? If you relate to this, you might notice that the replay happens most after you were trying to be liked, when you were performing a version of yourself, because performance always creates a hangover. The more you manage your image, the more you fear the moment the mask slipped, and your brain replays the footage like a security guard hunting for the exact second the intruder got in. So what does it tell about you? It tells that you care. It tells that you have a high sensitivity to social cues. It tells that you have an imagination strong enough to simulate other minds. It tells that you're capable of learning from experience. But it also tells that you may be using that capacity to punish yourself instead of guide yourself. It tells that somewhere your self-worth got tied to being socially correct, to being smooth, to never being the reason someone feels uncomfortable. And that's an impossible standard because human interaction is inherently messy. People misread each other constantly, even people who love each other, even people who are emotionally skilled. Conversation is improvisation, and improvisation includes awkwardness. There is a difference between reflection and rumination. Reflection asks, what can I learn? Rumination asks, what is wrong with me? Reflection tends to lead to action or acceptance. Rumination tends to lead to more rumination. The simplest way to tell which one you're doing is to notice the emotional tone. If your replay feels like curiosity, you're reflecting. If it feels like dread, you're ruminating. And dread always wants a culprit. It usually chooses you. There's a quiet experiment you can try the next time you catch yourself looping. Instead of replaying the conversation like a court case, replay it like a documentary. Not was I stupid, but what was happening in me. Notice your body. Were you tired? Were you hungry? Were you trying to impress? Were you bracing for conflict? Then notice what you're assuming about the other person. Are you assuming they are a perfect judge? Are you assuming they noticed everything? Are you assuming they're thinking about you as much as you're thinking about you? Most people are not. Most people are replaying their own lines. The world is full of private theatres. Another shift. Ask what you needed in that moment. Maybe you needed reassurance. Maybe you needed time. Maybe you needed permission to be imperfect. The replay often continues because a need went unmet and your mind is trying to meet it through analysis. But needs don't get met through analysis. They get met through care, through rest, through boundaries, through speaking up next time, not punishing yourself this time. If the conversation truly needs repair, you can repair it. You can send a message. You can clarify. You can apologize if you actually caused harm. That's real power. But if what you're trying to repair is the possibility that someone might have a negative thought about you, that's not repair. That's control. And control is the anxious person's substitute for trust. Trust is the hardest part. Trusting that you can be misunderstood and still be okay. Trusting that you can have an awkward moment and still be worthy of love. Trusting that not every social friction means disaster. Trusting that you don't need to mentally rehearse your humanity into perfection. Some of the most socially confident people aren't confident because they say everything right. They're confident because they recover. They let a weird moment pass. They don't build an identity around it. They assume they are allowed to be a person. And that assumption changes everything. It changes the meaning of the replay. Because when you believe you're allowed to be imperfect, the brain stops treating every sentence like a life or death referendum. The loop loses its fuel. You can still learn, you can still grow, but you don't have to bleed to do it. The truth is, replaying conversations is a form of intelligence. It's pattern recognition. It's social awareness. It's memory sharpened by emotion. The question is what you do with that intelligence. Do you use it to understand yourself or to interrogate yourself? Do you use it to become kinder or to become tighter, smaller, more afraid? Because you can't outthink your way into safety. Not the kind you actually want. The kind you want comes from a deeper place. From a relationship with yourself where you don't abandon you after a minor mistake, where you don't treat every awkward sentence as evidence of unworthiness, where you can say quietly after the replay begins, I see what you're trying to do, but you can stop now. And maybe that's the overlooked truth. The people who replay conversations are often the ones who are trained to be careful. They learned early that being careless had a cost. So they became meticulous with words, with timing, with expression. They became students of other people's moods. That skill helped them survive. It helped them belong. But survival skills can become prisons when the danger is gone. You don't need the same armor in every room. Some rooms are safe. Some people are forgiving. Some relationships can hold a little clumsiness without cracking. And you too can learn to hold it. So tonight, if your mind tries to drag you back into a conversation, like it's pulling you by the sleeve, pause. Notice the urge. Feel the weight of it. And then remember that the past cannot be perfected. It can only be understood. You can take what's useful, you can release what's cruel, and you can let the conversation finally end. Not because it was flawless, but because you're done using it as a mirror to punish yourself. Let it be what it was, a human moment, brief, imperfect. And if you look closely, I've already gone.